All right. Well, to start off with, thank all of you. This is about 15 people more than I was actually expecting to show up, especially with the particular time slot I was given. At the last minute, I threw my kind of like online identity down there in the bottom corner if anyone wants to like stalk me or something. To start off with just a quick narcissistic run on myself. My real name's Michael. I'm a pharmacy student at the University of Alaska, about to start my fourth year of school after I fly back up there when the convention's over. This is my third time coming here, first time on a panel, and obviously pre-pharm, pre-med, or pharm and med students in this fandom are either hard to come by or they're just hiding from me, because I posted ads for this everywhere and no one said anything. Or they said they couldn't come. But I got into this about, I think it was 2011, where it all started as a joke, and then I actually watched the first two episodes of the show when I got home from school in my senior year one day, and then it was 2 a.m. in the morning when I stopped, and so then the rest goes on like it pretty much has for everybody. And we shall start here. I am actually going into some actual like anatomy and physiology, unlike the previous panel that did last year. They were mainly really just a hyped up version of like an exercise commercial. But this is Healthy as a Horse, but I had to change that because we're not dealing with horses. Now, one thing I noticed in particular when looking back at the show is, from my perspective at least, equestrian ponies are absolutely healthy 100% of the time, with the exception of when the episode script calls for it. Then things happen. As you may know, we had one episode where Twilight had a 1,200-pound anvil fall on her head and then a piano fall on top of that. And she was perfectly fine 2 hours later, but when Rainbow Dash crashed in one episode, it broke her wing because the script required her wing to be broken for the entire episode. And healthy does equal happy for several reasons I'll go into, which when you're not happy, or when you're not healthy, you're not happy because of many things. Either you're sick, you're fatigued, which is my case, but that unfortunately for me is a genetic disorder that I can't really do anything about. You're depressed, immobilized, or maybe not necessarily immobilized, but kind of just out of commission. In worst case scenarios, you can be hospitalized. And when you are under these conditions, that keeps you from doing a lot of things that typically you're going to enjoy doing, like coming here and listening to me. So I'm not gonna go too in-depth, obviously. I mean, I am somewhat, because I can't resist it, but I'm gonna try to keep this at like an understandable level without hoping that doesn't sound insulting, but so we're going to have to learn first some few things. Now, health is the same thing as harmony. However, it's a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult to do than just throwing on some necklaces and shooting rainbows at things. So you rely on the proper functioning of your cells, which anyone who's taken basic biology knows that we're composed of about 70 trillion little sacs of water and proteins and enzymes that are all doing things. Now first, the most important system that's usually argued is the nervous system, which comprises your nervous system and your brain, which regulates thoughts, emotions, and interpretation of all the stimulus you're getting in from the world around you. Obviously, muscle cells should be self-explanatory. Although some people get paid a couple $100,000 a year to just literally work out 8 hours a day. Would be nice, but I don't really have the patience for it. Digestive system is also pretty self-explanatory, although each individual organ has its own separate function in that, but I won't be going into that particular system. And you should not do what you saw in that picture just now. No, you can do that. I do that frequently, actually. But you shouldn't consume the entire item that you just saw. I used to be able to consume an entire large Papa John's pizza in one sitting back in the old days of like 3 years ago when I was younger, like before I turned 20. I feel really old now. I'm 22. So then you probably have often heard the words hormones. Those are produced by something called the endocrine system. So they're usually called a mixture of endocrines and paracrines, but someone invented the word hormone in there to one-word them for some reason. And then one of my personal favorite systems, you have the immune system, which kills things, a lot of things, all day, every day. So you have the 6 elements, one of which I had to change at the last minute, which I submitted this for approval before I changed one word, so I'm hoping changing one word's not going to get me like banned from the convention or something, but I don't know. Now, I have nothing to actually give you, but free reward points and like special starflake feelings to anyone who can tell me what that is up there. Someone who I know or someone who I don't know personally, please, Josh. Security, remove him, please. I'm not being serious about that, just in case you guys actually heard that, but yeah, that's adenosine triphosphate, which is the molecular source of energy inside your body. It essentially everything revolves around this. I'll try to go into like a easy to understand version of how everything works. Essentially, your body, literally, your life in existence is a recurring endless cycle of different reactions. Will typically happen, for an example, is this here. You can see how it's got a strong negative charge right there. That will make it attracted to something, typically a protein like an enzyme complex or a receptor on the edge of a cell. It'll be attracted to it because they typically have a positive charge. And then when it comes in, that's going to attract at least a certain part of it, which bends the shape of that molecule. And then that bending makes it typically fold on top of that, chop, where's my mouse? Chop 1 or 2 of these off here. And then that will leave the 2 phosphates free floating and the now adenosine monophosphate with just one of these little P areas here will be free flowing as well. And then they're going to be attracted to something else down the line because they've just altered the charge of what they did. And in doing that, the figure of what they just twisted, at its other end, because these molecules are typically really huge, at its other end, it will have just twisted or flipped and either crushed something or chopped a piece of another molecule off, leaving that charged, and then that's going to float away and get attracted to something else. And then it ends up in just a cascade system that cycles around pretty endlessly until it gets back up into your brain and makes your brain aware of what's happened, which that process also is exactly what I just described, which ends in another signal going back down yet again. Hi, camera, I see you. So the first portion here of the 6, and this isn't like order of importance, this is just order that I felt like typing them up. The first primary thing here is energy, which you get from pretty much anything you put in your mouth, with the exception of like toys. Some things have more energy than others. Obviously, you're going to get the most energy out of fatty substances, although that's going to be a slower thing. You're going to get the quickest energy out of things that are just pure sugar, because pure sugar can just be turned into this really quickly. Then the second most important thing is fluid. As ridiculous as it sounds to most people, it is really, really important that you drink at least 2 liters of water a day, which equates to about half a gallon. I've already bored 6 people. Electrolytes, which are, you actually probably would recognize by the name of salt. So sodium chloride, potassium chloride, calcium chloride, few people know about. You need to constantly replenish those, because those are what's able to create charged potentials, or like flows of charge. It's actually how your nervous system sends signals. Is a chemical cascade will open up a bunch of channels where there's a bunch of potassium and sodium sitting outside the cell, and they'll all rush in, and because they're all positively charged, and the same charges repel each other because of basic magnetism, they'll force each other down like a river until they run up into a mess of neurotransmitters at the other end, waiting to be shoved out. And then those get shoved out and bind to the receptors on the next nerve, which initiates the exact same thing. And then the signal gets conducted all the way down the line. And as many steps as there are in it, as complex as it seems, it's incredibly quick. Your nervous system's capable of sending signals across a distance of, I think, 220 feet in about half a second. So then when you get in some other things here. Number 1 is stress management, because stress can really, really mess you up, as I'm sure some people in here have to be aware of by this point. Stress can really mess you up, because stress and depression gets lumped in with stress, because what generally happens is the more stressed you are and the more depressed you are, the more activity is going on in your mind, and it starts consuming a lot of energy and a lot of resources to reconstruct neural pathways, and that slowly starts drawing away from everything else. It'll draw away from free available energy for your immune system to use, which is why depression really tends to dampen people's immune activity. And also, at night, your brain's going to be a little bit too busy giving you nightmares and reconstructing new pathways to work out new memories and enhancing the amount of depression that you're going to feel when you think of something, as opposed to being able to spend resources on reconstructing muscles that you might have torn during the day, or pretty much anything else. Then physical activity is obviously necessary. We've pushed that a lot in the past 15 years or so. I'll get into specifics of that in a few more slides. And then sleep, as season 5 has taught you, is really, really important. However, the pillow you use also can determine the quality of sleep. Pancakes tend to not work. As expensive as they are, you really should get some kind of foam, memory foam Tempur-Pedic pillow. They're amazing. Now, no one's going to know this, but I forgot about that. And then you have some extra things that you also should watch out for, unless watching out for them stresses you out too much, because avoiding stress is more important. But you also need to get an adequate amount of minerals and vitamins and antioxidants, and plenty of those compounds actually are all 3 in 1. Now, no one's going to know this, but brownie points to anyone who can tell me what that is. Yes, it is. It's really old science that we've known about for about 100 years. That is called ascorbic acid, which you know by the name vitamin C. That's a really, really important substance that I'll talk about the importance of in 1 second when we get to the immune system. I jumped ahead of myself, already kind of talked about neurons and how they transmit signals, and it's literally the same thing. When neurotransmitters bind up here, they distort the shape of these molecules that then open up into tubes and let sodium and potassium and calcium flood in. And since they're the same charge, they repel each other, make a river all the way down here where there's neurotransmitters packed here that the pressure from all this current rushing in shoves out, and they come across and bind to the next neurons, dendrites up here, and the process just repeats over and over again. Now, that picture was really inadequate because this is an actual micrograph of what neurons really look like. The amount of shear connections that they have to other cells in the body and to each other is almost unfathomable, as it just becomes a blurry mess, like you can see. Now, here's typically a lot of people's favorite. This is the muscular system. Now, this is a typical muscle, and inside each muscle, it has individual little parts called fascicles, which then have individual little parts called strands. And then those, it just keeps going, have the individual muscle cells inside of them. And when you break it all down, they're essentially just big cylinders that are full of proteins that are wrapped around each other in a really tight swirl. That leads into this here is a just basic line version that I found of what it looks like at the most fundamental level, although obviously it's, bumpy and cute and like circular-y and stuff. But so what happens is you send a signal down to your muscle, and typically these elastic strands right here, they're wrapped in a certain protein, but it's attracted to a positive charge. And so when your neuron sends a signal to that muscle, that's going to open some channels by the distorting, the protein complex in the membrane, just like in the neuron itself. But in this case, it's going to let a bunch of positively charged stuff flow out of the muscle, which then your muscles have little sacs of calcium inside them. And then when positive stuff rushes out, the calcium's going to burst out of those sacs. And then when the calcium bursts out, the little snake that wraps around these elastic bands here is going to be attracted to the calcium, and it's going to come off. And then these things right here, they're called myosin heads. They will then grab this one by one and slowly pull on it until these things here flatten out and it's completely stretched. And as they pull together, obviously that slowly compresses it and is what gives you your muscular tension. Now, you can go from this to this slowly. Please don't listen to commercials about using the total gym for 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, and in 6 weeks you'll have a body like this, and it shows like Mark Henry or Triple H, for anyone who watches wrestling. It doesn't work. That takes about 10 years and a lot of steroids. Now, how this actually works is, I don't know if I can go backwards. Oh, I can. When you stretch too far, if you put too much strain on it, you're going to rip pieces in here. And when these particular proteins, any piece of any of these strands here, if they float outwards because they got ripped off, there's receptors on the inside of the muscle that will sense them, and that will initiate a chemical cascade process to make more of them and to pack the muscle more tightly with more strands so that it will have more power. And slowly, that's how your bulk and size build up over time, which is why you're always told to feel the burn, because once you feel the burn, that means that you're starting to rip things apart, and that's what you want to a certain extent. Now, my personal favorite is the immune system. Actually is tied in with exercise a lot, because the immune system, it's full of a lot of lymph vessels, which are kind of like green veins. They follow your veins and your arteries around, and a lot of your blood gets channeled into them and forced through them, where they come to, I know everyone's heard of lymph nodes. Everyone's probably had swollen lymph nodes at some point, where every few inches along your body, they have to pass through a lymph node here, which all these things in here are hundreds of thousands of white blood cells, which everything in your blood that's being filtered is going to be shoved through there. So anything that doesn't belong is going to be consumed and destroyed, except for a few unfortunate viruses that we have, such as HIV, that actually infect immune cells themselves, and thus they hide inside the police officers that are supposed to hunt them. But muscular action, because this is not connected, the lymph system isn't connected to the actual pumping of your heart, movement of your muscles is what it relies on. When you contract your muscles, that compresses these and helps force the lymph along and force it through the lymph nodes to get filtered. So a lack of exercise actually will also end up in a depressed immune system. And lack of exercise combined with depression from your lack of exercise is only going to compound the issue. So yeah, inside each lymph node, there are several 100,000 white blood cells waiting, and when they find things, they consume them. Because on the outside, they have tens of millions of really smaller receptors that feel around, because each individual type of living cell, each individual single organism, you, your brother, each different bacteria has a specific pattern of little proteins and sugars that'll stick out on itself so that it can recognize each other. Or for bacteria, it's really just to know which other bacteria they can eat. But for us, it's obviously so our immune system can tell which cells belong to our body and which cells don't. So when it feels around and it feels like, no, I didn't mean to do that. When it feels a bacteria or some of these bacteria and feels, oh, you obviously don't belong here, then it's going to swallow them. And you get this interesting fact here that few people know about. Your body actually has about 2 to 5 milliliters of bleach in it at any given time, because your white blood cells actually make bleach, and they store it inside these little things here. And once the bacteria are inside, then they'll swarm in and just pour bleach all over it. And bleach will kill absolutely anything, I guarantee you of that. Alcohol works pretty good for bacteria and microbes and that. But bleach is the only thing that will kill absolutely everything, which is why, if anyone's familiar with OSHA, organization that can be pretty annoying sometimes, the most recommended cleaning chemical is just generic Kelso bleach, because bleach will kill anything it touches, including the skin cells on your scalp. If you get your hair dyed frequently like I do, comes off in flakes for days after that. But luckily your skin is on average 50 to 70 cells thick, most of which are already dead. So now I've given you a basic rundown of what I felt would be worth going into. I mean, I could have gone into other things like the digestive system and that, but I didn't want to take up too much time because there's still the second half of this. So hopefully nobody's that confused. But first step, obviously, is to eat a good enough diet. Not in these amounts, but you see, you get your loaves of bread, you get your vegetables, your fruits, and you can still stick your sweets in there somewhere. Like, I'll look you in the face and tell you I eat a bar of German chocolate every single day. Now, I also, do things to compensate like that, such as, in my case, I walk 6 miles almost every day. But I actually didn't start doing that for the sake of exercise. I actually started doing that just because I liked walking around while listening to music. It helped me zone out from the world. But to start off, you have your primary goals of what you're trying to accomplish, which is just to get enough energy for the day. And the numbers for that vary. On average, it's expected that you're going to spend about 2,000 calories, but that can vary depending on how active you are or inactive you are. If you just sat around and existed, you would only need about 1,100 or 1,200 per day. However, it's expected that the 2,000 a day is just for an assumed, like regularly getting up from a desk or getting up from the couch, walking around and making dinner and doing stuff. Actually working out then raises that number higher. People who run every day or work out frequently can actually go up to 3,000 or 4,000. You want to get your proteins, and just a little tidbit from the digestive system, you actually want to make sure you have protein in every meal, because it's actually the presence of protein in the stomach that triggers the stomach to secrete more enzymes and more stomach acid. So even though most things have some amount of protein in them, if you did something stupid like, you just started eating a stick of butter, that's not going to go over well. You also need, despite everyone's hatred of it, you need fats, especially because anyone know what a phospholipid bilayer is? 3 people. It's what the wall around each individual cell is made out of. It's actually made of fat, because fat's really good at tying itself together. So actually, a large amount of your body fat is not actually in just big pockets of fat. It actually is just composing the walls of your cells. However, there's obviously pockets will get deposited if you're not using it for energy. And I'll get into how to use it for energy in a second if you want to burn fat specifically. And then you also want your vitamins and your minerals. Like I already mentioned, a few of those can be all 3 or 2 at once, like vitamin C, selenium, and vitamin E. Now, just because I want to scare people, I'm not going to actually go into this. I just wanted to show you what this actually looks like. I find this fascinating and entertaining. This is beautiful to me. This is what's happening inside of you at a molecular scale, which all of that is actually just for this quick little thing right here. And it all happens inside this, which is mitochondria, which I think even like elementary school biology probably goes into that, although I'm pretty sure they just make you name them and move on. But this is another really microscopic image, and you see all the little like black dots and haze in the blue. That's all clouds of where that massive circular system I just showed you is happening. And there's typically, I think, about 250,000 individual systems happening inside each mitochondria, and each cell typically has 20 to 30, with some exceptions, like cells in your heart are pretty much 60% of their cell volume is just filled with mitochondria, because it's the one and only thing inside of you that is always contracting, or so you hope. Now this is just a quick thing. This is what a fat actually looks like on a molecular stick and line drawing, and they're not normally differentiated, but they put them up here just to show you the different ones. The only thing that's not up here is something called trans fats, which are really bad for you, because the way this works is in a trans fat, it'll be flipped. Like this is called a cis formation from organic chemistry. In a trans fat, it means at least one of them is flipped on the other side, which means that you can't absorb that. You can't do anything with it. So literally, it's just all it's doing is making whatever amount of food you're eating bigger. You're not actually going to gain anything out of it. So cis is really bad, and if it does get into you, it will lodge itself in the walls of your blood vessels with no hesitation whatsoever. Regular fats kind of need help for that. You need high blood pressure pressing everything against the walls of your blood vessels to make regular fats stick in. Trans fats, because they have that big prawn sticking out, they'll do it themselves. So obviously, you want to eat other things too, like to get actual amounts of energy, because vegetables and fruits don't have a lot. But these are some of the best things that you can eat, as a lot of these have basically every single vitamin and mineral you want in them, along with other compounds that are way too heavy for me to want to go into that, and there's about 2,000 of them. They're just generally called antioxidants, but we've started calling them carotenoids because we found them in carrots first. And want to go over a few misconceptions here. This is one of the big ones. Notice the angry face. It is completely different. Applesauce is nothing but sugar. It is completely and absolutely sugar. Sugar in a cup. And juice is not the same as a vegetable. And that's mainly because what comes out of there is they mainly concentrate on just getting the color and the flavor. They don't really care about getting the nutritional value out of it. So they squeeze it, and then they chip up a few bits, mix it up, and boom, you have your carrot juice, or you have your whatever. Apple dippers at McDonald's, don't even get me started on those. Banana bread is very good. It tastes wonderful. I love it. But it is not actually beneficial for you, and neither is carrot cake. So I haven't brainwashed you as much as I wanted to, but for anyone who has seen the opening of the 5th season, what's going on back there? We're going to just run through some things that you should be able to say now. No. With soda in particular, there are things in soda. The sugar doesn't matter, the sodium doesn't matter. The whole empty calories thing, yes, that's true, but that's not what concerns people like me that are going into the pharmacy field, which focuses a lot more on molecular biology than just whole system biology, which is, if you want to become a doctor, that's what you're going to do, because that's what you focus on when you're just trying to do diagnoses. There are things in soda that you do not want to go into your body. One of them, you probably maybe have heard the word aspartame. It is really, really bad. In more concentrated amounts, I mean, you could have like a cup of soda a day and it probably wouldn't matter. But if you drink the amount that most college students do every day, that's really going to hurt you later down the line. Aspartame and something called TBHQ, which is a preservative that's put in almost every piece of American candy, which is one of the reasons why I only eat German chocolate, apart from the fact that American chocolate is disgusting. But there's another one called TBHQ that's used to preserve candy that is absolutely horrible. The safe amount for that is about 3 Reese's peanut butter cups a day. Beyond that, you're actually reaching a risk of it causing damage. Although, just like with drinking minor amounts of alcohol every day, if you cross the damage point, it does all depend whether you damage the stem cell of that local area. For like every group of about 60 cells in an organ, there's going to be 1 or 2 stem cells in the middle of like a big patch. If you damage the stem cell, then that's it for that area at least. Once those cells die, all you're going to get growing there is cancerous cells or innate cells that have their DNA damaged and won't really be able to perform the functions they're supposed to. TBHQ and aspartame, which is in soda, both particularly like damaging kidney cells, although aspartame can also cause some damage to just generic throat cells. Now we have something my friend Josh likes to eat a lot. Big, probably, 15-pound, 80-inch wide burger, whatever that is. So this is how you make a princess happy. You eat things like this, and only eat red delicious apples because red delicious apples are superior and all other apples are nonsense. And carrots in particular, just a note on those, they're a little bit special. Go for, they don't have to have the top still attached, but go for whole carrots that are still like an actual big carrot. Don't get baby carrots, as baby carrots are, they're like not the real deal. Now, on to the portion about exercising. Ignore everything you see on TV. Don't buy Shaun T's insanity videos or whatever they are, where he makes you like jump up and down while holding 50-pound weights in each hand for an hour. What really matters, if you're trying to say lose weight, what matters is just movement. You need to move. And typically you want to move for a minimum of half an hour, because your muscle cells, at first, they're going to use the sugar that they store in themselves, because they're not stupid. They know what they do, and they know it takes a lot of energy. So they store big pockets of sugar in themselves and use it to make ATP really fast. But when those run out, they'll start sucking, free sugar that's just floating in your blood. However, if they start consuming that too fast and your blood sugar drops, then the endocrine system, which I'll only touch on this once, releases a hormone that everyone knows of, insulin, but almost no one knows about its counterpart, which is called glucagon, which does the exact opposite. When glucagon binds to, glucagon targets your fat cells in wherever your fat's concentrated around your body, and it triggers them to slowly start releasing triglycerides and releasing fat into your blood. Because if you start running your sugar too low, then your muscles are going to start sending that signal that they need something more. And fat, they actually will prefer to use it, although they won't use it at first because they have to start that whole cascade to actually get access to it. But they actually prefer it because it's a better source of energy. It has more energy to it than sugar does. Sugar's just easier to use because it's quick. So your muscle cells kind of function like most American businesses, quick and cheap. It's quick and cheap because doing good stuff is like hard and difficult, and that takes time. And we all know we're all lazy. So after about 30 minutes, whatever you're doing, it can be shorter if you just start flat out running, or if you just start doing clapper push-ups without stopping. But generally, within about 30 minutes, you will be completely running off of body fat for your energy source. So that's why if you do something like, say, just walking, I'd say you want to do at least an hour of it. You don't have to do 6 miles like me. If you're running typically will reach this point in only half that time. So running for about half an hour is usually good, but you can always go longer. Plus, I already went into how muscle movement helps your lymph flow along through your lymph nodes. And the speed at which your muscles will start to atrophy, which means decay, shocks most people. If you immobilize a muscle and it is not moving whatsoever, it will actually start to just let itself get pulled apart within 18 hours. And then it doesn't happen overnight, but slowly it'll release parts of itself into the blood that'll get sucked up by the liver and chomped down and used to make energy for other parts of the body that actually are being used. And now I told you about how you don't need to memorize this. I told you about how in the muscle cells, when you tear it and pieces of those protein strings float off and hit receptors on the inside, that triggers a cascade that ends up making it synthesize more muscle strands. Something similar when you're working out or just doing tough stuff, I guess, can happen in your bones. because you do need a tiny bit, and please don't chug toothpaste when I tell you this, you do need a tiny bit of fluoride in your diet to get into your system. The only thing it is really used for is in your bones. So I don't know if you can see each of these tiny little gray/white things right here. This is what your bone looks like at the molecular level. It is, it's not a giant rod of calcium like elementary school teaches kids. There's a lot of calcium in there, but it's actually proteins wrapped around calcium, wrapped around proteins, wrapped around calcium, wrapped around proteins, about to the 8th power. But there's individual little fluoride molecules in there. And if you put enough stress on your bones, you can cause little tiny fractures, little ruptures. And if these fluoride molecules get out and the cells that crawl over the surface of your bones or on the inside sense those, they'll start up a process and they'll make some more layers of bone and like squeeze what's already in there even tighter, so your bones can get harder and more dense, which makes the difference between some people have like easily breakable bones, and then there's freaks like me that have never broken a bone in their life. Yeah. Two other people, awesome. And this, again, just don't let it scare you. This is a like broad picture of what I was talking about just a second ago. Glucagon, the opposite to insulin, which gets released when your blood sugar drops. Norepinephrine, which is kind of functions the same as epinephrine, which you know by the name adrenaline. If you start working out like good, if like beyond walking, if you start doing something that raises your heart rate, your blood's going to fill with adrenaline. And as you can see by the joined arrows, adrenaline will cause the same reaction that glucagon does. So that'll also trigger your fat cells to start releasing fat into the blood to be used for energy. Along with this thing here is called growth factor alpha. That also gets released by your muscle cells when you cause damage to them by working out too much. That comes here and does the exact same thing, so that you have all this fat coming out into your blood to be used for energy to both rebuild the muscle or power the muscle if it's still working. Because normally insulin and adenosine up here, as that doesn't end in an arrow, that just ends in a line. Normally those two are constantly being bound on your fat cells and constantly stopping them from releasing it. But these three, if they start binding, they'll override those two in a second. These three have more power, but you have to do things that make them get released. So you hopefully can be like this, or like this, except the flying part. Unless we have Superman in here. Josh, you want to make that claim? I guess he does. And then you can do probably not stuff like this. I don't know if that really works with a human. Then some ponies like to be more fit than others. However, unfortunately, I think that was a bad message on the show's part. The most physically fit pony they like destroyed with like a love laser. Do you not see what he was trying to advocate here? And then you need sleep. You need sleep for quite a few reasons. Obviously, unless you have restless leg syndrome, you basically don't move when you sleep, or nowhere near as much as you do when you're awake. Your GI tract, which is your digestive system, it stops when you're asleep. Your heart rate slows down, typically by about 20 beats a minute. Even if you do dream, your brain is still nowhere near as active as it is when you're having conscious thoughts. So all of this means that you have a lot more free energy from none of this stuff happening. You have a lot more free energy for your immune cells to use, which is why most of your immune function ends up happening when you're asleep. There's more autonomic, which means out of your control, autonomic nervous signals are free because they're not governing your digestive tract. Since your brain governs that for you, obviously you don't actively, think to contract your stomach and your intestines every 15 seconds. That's all done for you. But when that's not happening, all those nerves are able to send signals elsewhere and do other things, one of which is contracting the derma, which surrounds your cerebrospinal fluid that like kind of flows through your brain. It contracts that, which flushes your brain and helps keep toxins out of your brain, hopefully prevent tumors, at least for 6 decades or so. And the reduced brain load allows for the reconstruction of neural connections, which the way memories form is the more activated certain areas in your brain are, areas that represent certain thoughts or certain feelings, the more activated they are, the little area in the synapse will slowly start to accumulate a specific type of molecule. And whenever you go to sleep, whenever that stops, that molecule will get sucked up and activate receptors inside the neuron, which will start another cascade that will make it grow more connections to whatever neuron it was signaling. And so that's how memories are formed slowly over time, and others are deconstructed because the material to build the new connections has to come from somewhere. So unfortunately, your brain's just going to pick memories that you haven't accessed for a while, and it's just going to tear them apart. Now, stress management, I already went over. Stress will bring you down emotionally, will bring you down physically, will bring you down immunologically without you knowing it until you know it. And I just had to throw that in there because, there's some young people in here around my age-ish, and we all know young people are dumb. Yeah, drugs are very bad. You got that right there, sonny. My uncle, he did that cocaine. It messed him up real bad. So that's a follow-up image to that, because that's essentially what I feel like when someone I know decides they want to start doing drugs, and then they like complain to me a month later about like how messed up their life has become and how horrible it's making them feel. It's right in front of your face. I mean, it's just like, what you think's going to happen if you down 2 6-packs of booze in one night. That's probably going to end with a toilet episode. So for anyone that might potentially actually be interested in going into careers in the healthcare profession, I'm putting this up as kind of a warning. After your hype dies down, after the first little bit of it, the first little while, this is essentially what it becomes. And ignore I don't know what that is on her head, but she's supposed to be a patient or a customer complaining about supposedly poor service. This is essentially what it will turn into, in most places at least, unless you work at some fancy place that like only has a quota of like 12 patients a day or something, but those are going to be pretty rare to come across. It is extremely, extremely, extremely stressful. I will not lie about that. Even just getting to that point, which I'm still in the process of, is extremely, extremely stressful. As I spend quite a bit of time studying, not just to pass exams, also because, like I said, I'm a freak. I actually enjoy it. The train ride up here, a 10-hour train ride, about 7 hours of that I spent just reading hundreds of pages of medical text for the 8th time. It can get pretty bad, but at least in my case, I'm not going to stop, because if you have just this like deep down, unexplainable, like insuppressible drive to want to help people.
It's your cutie mark.
Yes. Just even if like me, you're not particularly a nice person, I still, on the outside at least, I do not come across as a nice person, but the only thing I basically think about in my own free time, if I'm not actively doing something, is learning more so that I can potentially do more. The process education-wise obviously involves completing high school, although that is frowned upon in today's modern youth. You have to obviously finish high school. To either go into medical school or pharmacy school, you have to get a bachelor's of science in some field, most preferably something biology related. Interpretive dance isn't going to work. And it does have to be a bachelor's. With me in particular, this year I'll be finishing the cellular biology one, and then next year I'll be finishing my molecular biology one. And then after that, I'll be going to actual pharmacy school, which is another 4 years after that. So I will be at my particular university for a long time. So room 314, Stevens Hall, is my room. It's going to stay my room. It's both medical school and pharmacy school are 4-year programs, assuming that you do it at the rate that they expect. I mean, you don't have to. You can finish faster. You can finish slower. A lot of schools now do they kind of administratively bully you to try to make you finish on like their exact 4-year mark because it makes them look good. But ultimately, not just like your feelings wise, it's just words, but it really is just words. They're not going to do anything to you. You're still giving them money, so ultimately they don't care. But it's assumedly going to take you 4 years of college and then 4 years in the program. And doctors have it a little bit harder because you're actually actively and physically interacting with patients a lot. So you actually have to do something you might have heard of called residency, which is like a really professional term for an internship, except you don't actually do anything. You just sit there and watch for, I think the minimum is 2 years before you're allowed to practice on your own, although a lot of programs actually prefer you to do 3 or more. For those of us who are going into pharmacy, we have it slightly easier because we have to do something similar called pharmacy shadow hours, but we're allowed to do that during pharmacy school. Most doctors have to do their residency after they finished medical school. So the full program into doctorhood actually is like 11 to 12 years, whereas pharmacy is only 8, or in my case 9, because my BS degree is a dual degree system. I believe nursing's a little bit easier. I think you, depending on the state, you only have to have an associate's of science in something, and then the nursing program itself is 2 years, and then you have to do a nursing internship after that. So in total, I think it's 5. If anyone wants to be a dentist like Colgate, I'm sorry, I have no idea about dentistry. We don't have a dental program at UAF, so I'm completely unfamiliar with the path to dentistry. I know there is a dental school. I don't know if they require a BS in science first, or if their program is 4 years. I have no idea. So, and then just to make it even more scary, since I see a few people that constantly nervously smile, which makes me think they might be going down that road. If you want to become a specialist, then it gets even more fun, because then you have to do another 3 years of specialization after that. So you'll be a doctor, or if you want to say become a foot doctor, you'll be a podiatrist by when you're 35 or 36. You'll be able to start up on your own. Is it worth it? That's all up to you. That entirely depends on if you have this face for it, which when it comes to pharmacy, I do. When it comes, if I were talking about actual like general physician doctor, no. I personally can't deal with people coming in with a stuffy nose and thinking that they're about to drop dead. I would not be able to handle that 50 times every day, every single day of the week. I'm more going into pharmacy because ironically, because of a MLP fan fiction I started writing, I actually developed a small interest in medicinal drugs, and I just started studying on my own. And then that developed into an obsession, which then became the past 3 years of my life. So I am kind of in it for the science because I absolutely love biology at the molecular level, and I love being able to, picture full circle in my head, the cascade as it goes endlessly. But that's just me. If you're more of a people person, then you'll probably enjoy being a doctor. If you enjoy causing people pain, you will probably enjoy being a dentist because nobody brushes their teeth anymore. You will have plenty of work. Except for me, I'm going to make you mad because I brush my teeth, so you're not going to have that much to do. Yeah, typically, this is more just me. Typically, like I said, I'm not really a nice person on the outside, so typically this is what my face looks like most of the time. And this, I felt I had to throw in here for you so that I can, tell you there probably will be happy moments for you. Not for me, but for you, definitely. Because people tend to love their doctors. People tend to hate pharmacists because it's a lot easier to blame us for problems because they don't actually interact with us that much, so they don't feel there's going to be that much of a consequence to getting mad at us and asking to speak to the manager, who's just going to tell them that they're right and then tell me to ignore everything they said after they leave. There can be happy moments. People might appreciate you, but again, that all depends. Especially depends what you're doing also. People tend to be really, really appreciative of nurses and pretty appreciative of doctors. Dentists get it pretty bad though. Pharmacists just take a lot of heat that people don't want to vent at their doctors. Dentists get it bad because you're ripping somebody's mouth open, and they're trying to. It's my interpretation that they're just trying to pass blame off onto you for their lack of teeth brushing. Because I promise you all, I struggled with it once. It's really simple. You put the toothpaste on the brush and then you swirl it around. It works. And actually, you really, really should. Because the little bit of dental anatomy that you cover in regular anatomy and physiology, you'll learn just how quickly you can destroy your teeth. I have a friend named Jeremy who lives back in Massachusetts who had never brushed his teeth since I think the last time his mom actually made him every night was back when he was 8. He's the same age as me now. He has already had 9 permanent teeth pulled out because they were too far degraded. He's had, I don't know, probably a dozen root canals, probably something over 20 fillings. It's going to get pretty bad, and then you're going to be like 30 and you're going to have to get dentures and fake teeth already. So that's about it for what I had scheduled and very poorly rehearsed. So, huh? My Faust?
Sorry, your character.
Okay, I was about to say, bro, do you even see wings on that thing?
In all honesty, just curious from really bright lights, so no. That's why I said not that. I saw it tomorrow.
Oh, dark. Oh, yeah. Really random medical fact. Dark adjustment for your eyes is a lot slower than bright adjustment. They'll adjust to brightness in about 90 seconds. Adjusting to darkness takes about 20 minutes because of another law and cascade process that I won't talk about. Because I think I'm out of time, but I'm not getting a signal that they're about to like kick me out. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask until they kick me out, and then you can ask me out there, I guess.
How does the delay between the free energy floating in the blood system and the energy that's reserved, how does that delay work? Is there, some people feel as though there's a gap between the two energy sources?
If you're talking about muscles specifically, your muscles store enough sugar in themselves to work for about 30 seconds. However, after that, that's when you'll feel probably a little bit of a tinge or a burn, and then after that, it might die down, because it'll take the muscle. As complex as the processes are, these are molecules. They're like a nanometer wide, and E equals mc squared. So they require almost no energy to move. So these processes happen in microseconds. The whole like adjustment to opening its channels up to suck sugar in out of the blood will probably take about 15 seconds. And then after that, then the burning after that's going to come from your muscles filling up with lactic acid, which is a breakdown product of the citric acid cycle. And that, depending on the muscle and how well worked out it is, can take anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. And actually, the presence of lactic acid, if it's in a high enough amount, triggers yet more receptors, which triggers yet another cascade, which triggers your muscle to make more mitochondria so that it can synthesize more energy faster and to make bigger sugar pockets inside of itself.